Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Kody Brown's financial stability reached a breaking point when he was forced to confront the reality of his dire economic situation. After years of questionable financial decisions, mounting debts, and the fallout from multiple failed business ventures, Kody found himself on the brink of bankruptcy. Desperate to salvage what little remained of his financial security, he turned to two of his former spouses, Janelle and Meri, for help. However, in a humiliating twist of fate, both women refused to bail him out, leaving Kody to face the consequences of his own mismanagement. This moment marked a significant turning point in the already strained relationships within the Brown family, exposing deep-seated resentments and the long-term repercussions of Kody's leadership, or lack thereof. For years, Kody had positioned himself as the head of the family, making major financial decisions that often left his wives and children in precarious situations. From the disastrous move to Flagstaff, Arizona, which was poorly planned and executed, to the ill-fated purchase of Coyote Pass, a property that remained largely undeveloped despite the family's significant investment, Kody's financial judgment had repeatedly been called into question. His ventures into reality TV, while initially profitable, had dwindled in success, and his attempts at entrepreneurship, including his gun accessory business, failed to generate sustainable income. As his debts piled up, it became clear that Kody had no real strategy for financial recovery, relying instead on the hope that one of his wives would step in to rescue him. Janelle, long considered the most financially savvy of the wives, had always been cautious with money. She had worked tirelessly to build a stable financial foundation for herself and her children, even as Kody's impulsive spending and lack of planning put the entire family at risk. When Kody approached her for financial assistance, she was firm in her refusal. Having witnessed firsthand the consequences of his reckless decisions, Janelle was unwilling to sacrifice her own security to bail him out. Her rejection was not just a financial decision but a symbolic one, a clear message that she was no longer willing to enable his irresponsible behavior. For years, she had played the role of the pragmatic peacemaker, but this time, she stood her ground, prioritizing her own well-being over Kody's demands. Meri, on the other hand, had her own complicated history with Kody. Once a central figure in their plural marriage, their relationship had deteriorated over the years, particularly after the fallout from her emotional affair and Kody's subsequent emotional withdrawal. Despite their strained dynamic, Meri had remained financially independent, building a successful business with her bed and breakfast, Lizzie's Heritage Inn, and her LuLaRoe clothing ventures. When Kody came to her for help, she too refused, a decision that underscored the emotional and financial distance between them. Unlike in the past, when Meri might have relented out of loyalty or hope for reconciliation, this time she held firm, signaling that she was no longer willing to be financially entangled with a man who had long since checked out of their marriage. The rejections from both Janelle and Meri were more than just personal blows to Kody, they were public admissions of his financial incompetence. For a man who had always prided himself on being the provider and leader of his family, this moment was a stark humiliation. It also highlighted the growing independence of his former wives, both of whom had learned the hard way that relying on Kody's financial leadership was a losing proposition. Where they had once pooled resources and worked as a unit, the family's financial infrastructure had crumbled alongside their relationships. Kody's desperation in asking for money also raised questions about where his finances had truly gone. Over the years, viewers of Sister Wives had seen the family's lifestyle fluctuate, from their lavish weddings and vacations to their struggles with debt and unstable living situations. Rumors swirled about Kody's spending habits, with some speculating that he had prioritized his own comfort over the needs of his wives and children. His inability to account for his financial downfall only fueled suspicions that he had mismanaged funds or failed to plan for the future. Without Janelle's budgeting skills or Meri's additional income streams, Kody was left exposed, with no safety net to fall back on. The fallout from this financial crisis extended beyond Kody's pride. It further fractured the already fragile relationships within the Brown family. His adult children, many of whom had grown disillusioned with their father's leadership, saw his financial plea as yet another example of his failures. Some expressed frustration that he had once again put his own needs above those of the family, while others sympathized with their mothers for refusing to be dragged back into financial instability. The public nature of their lives on reality TV meant that Kody's financial struggles played out in front of millions, adding an extra layer of humiliation to an already dire situation. In the end, Kody's bankruptcy scare served as a harsh lesson in accountability. For years, he had operated under the assumption that his wives would always be there to support him, financially and emotionally, regardless of his decisions. But as Janelle and Meri's rejections proved, that era was over. Both women had moved on, building lives and financial security independent of Kody. His inability to adapt to this new reality left him isolated, facing the consequences of his own actions without the safety net he had once taken for granted. The story of Kody Brown's financial downfall is not just one of personal failure but also a cautionary tale about the dangers of poor leadership, unchecked ego, and financial irresponsibility. It underscores the importance of accountability and the reality that even in plural marriage, trust and support are not unconditional. Janelle and Meri's refusal to rescue Kody was not just about money, it was about self-respect, boundaries, and the recognition that sometimes, the only way for people to learn is to face the fallout of their own mistakes. As Kody navigates the aftermath of his financial crisis, one thing is clear: the days of relying on his wives to clean up his messes are over. Kody Brown's financial stability reached its peak when he was forced to swallow his pride and turn to two of his former wives, Janelle and Meri, for financial assistance to avoid bankruptcy. This desperate plea marked a humiliating low for the once dominant patriarch of the sister wives' family, whose years of questionable financial decisions, impulsive spending, and failed business ventures had finally caught up with him. Despite his past confidence, often bordering on arrogance, about his ability to provide for his large family, Kody found himself in dire straits, facing mounting debts, legal troubles, and dwindling income. His downfall was not just financial but symbolic, representing the collapse of the carefully constructed image he had maintained for years on reality television. However, in a twist that underscored the fractured state of their relationships, both Janelle and Meri refused his request for help, leaving him to face the consequences of his own mismanagement alone. For years, Kody had positioned himself as the leader of the Brown family, making major financial decisions, often unilaterally, that impacted all four of his wives and their children. From the disastrous move from Las Vegas to Flagstaff, which resulted in significant financial losses, to his ill-fated ventures like the family's failed jewelry business and his obsession with purchasing undeveloped land in Coyote Pass, Kody's choices were frequently driven by impulse rather than sound planning. His lack of foresight became increasingly apparent as the family's financial burdens grew, with multiple mortgages, unsold properties, and legal disputes draining their resources. Meanwhile, his favoritism toward Robin, his fourth and legal wife, became more pronounced, with accusations surfacing that he prioritized her financial security over the other wives. This favoritism bred resentment, particularly from Janelle and Meri, who had contributed significantly to the family's finances over the years but felt sidelined in Kody's decision-making. Janelle, long considered the most financially savvy of the wives, had always been a stabilizing force in the family's finances. She worked steady jobs, managed budgets, and even spearheaded the family's efforts to achieve financial independence. However, as Kody's decisions grew increasingly erratic, Janelle began distancing herself, both emotionally and financially. By the time he came to her for help, their relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. Janelle, who had already separated from Kody, recognized that bailing him out would only enable his irresponsible behavior. She had spent years watching him make reckless choices without consulting the family, and she refused to sacrifice her own financial security for his mistakes. Her rejection was not just a refusal of money, it was a rejection of Kody's leadership and a declaration of her independence. Meri's refusal, on the other hand, carried a different weight. Once Kody's first wife and a central figure in the family, Meri had endured years of emotional neglect as Kody openly favored Robin and distanced himself from her. Despite her loyalty, evidenced by her continued financial contributions to the family even after their romantic relationship ended, Kody had repeatedly dismissed her needs and excluded her from major decisions. Meri had built her own successful business with LuLaRoe, achieving a level of financial stability independent of the family. When Kody approached her for help, she saw no reason to rescue a man who had shown her so little respect. Her rejection was a final act of self-preservation, a refusal to be used after years of being taken for granted. The fallout from their rejections was severe. Kody, who had always relied on the collective financial support of his wives, was now isolated, facing the very real possibility of bankruptcy. His public persona as a capable provider was shattered, and his inability to secure help from Janelle and Meri only highlighted the fractures within the family. Rumors swirled about the state of his finances, with some speculating that his assets were being liquidated to cover debts. Meanwhile, Janelle and Meri's decisions to prioritize their own well-being sent a powerful message: they were no longer willing to prop up Kody's ego or his poor choices. This moment was more than just a financial crisis, it was the culmination of years of dysfunction within the Brown family. Kody's downfall was a direct result of his controlling behavior, lack of accountability, and failure to treat his wives as equal partners. His expectation that Janelle and Meri would bail him out, despite the emotional and financial distance between them, demonstrated just how out of touch he had become. Their rejections were not just about money, they were about reclaiming their autonomy after years of being undervalued. In the end, Kody's financial desperation became a public spectacle, another chapter in the ongoing saga of the Brown family's unraveling. For viewers of Sister Wives, it was a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ego and poor leadership. For Janelle and Meri, it was a moment of empowerment, a final break from a man who had long taken them for granted. And for Kody, it was a harsh lesson in accountability, one that came far too late.